Problems! We have some problems. Last video we were looking at those who had no problems. Namely, Andrew Carnegie, who is $300 billion in today's money, no problems. And John D. Rockefeller, $600 billion in today's money, no problems. Granted, they had some issues, but compared to the normal people of the United States, they are pretty well off. So, with the growth of industry, you have problems. This is a glass factory, and as you can see, the employee here is not very old. And we'll talk about that as one of the big problems that arises. So last year we talked about the early mills. We have the Lowell mills, which if you haven't visited them, you should. So the Lowell mills, they initially start out, they're being worked by girls, the Lowell girls. And they are brought in from the farms, surrounding farms in New England. They're given wholesome environments to work in, but they also can earn wages. Really one of the first times women are earning wages for themselves. So here's an image of one of the factories in Lowell. As you can see, the buildings are spread out. Like in early Lawrence, you have a lot of trees, a lot of open space, and places where when you have downtime, you can go relax. The girls are all living together in dorms, and they have to attend church. So you have a relatively good environment. Certainly they're working long hours, but they're certainly not forced to. They could choose a life on the farm, but they are becoming empowered, and they're getting money that they can spend on themselves. So these are the early mills. Now, as they become more and more productive, people desire more and more goods. And that's when mills start growing. This, as you might be familiar with, is Lawrence. Lawrence, as it starts growing in the 1880s, 1890s, the mills become massive. And with larger mills, you have more workers. You have thousands of people now living in Lawrence and other mill cities. And they're all working in mills. They're working 24 hours, so there's night shifts. And they're living in the cities themselves. So these cities, which once were pretty wide open, you had open space, they're becoming more crowded. And since they desire more workers, even children are put to work. These are some boys who worked in the mills in Lawrence. These are pictures from Lawrence. They worked in the mills, and children are useful because they can get into machines more than adults can. So lots of people are being put to work, including children. Entire families are working in the mills. This is a family in Lawrence that everyone in the family has some sort of job involved in the mills. They're providing for their family, which is a good thing, but you're also thinking about kids who really should be in school and having fun. But when you're working 8, 9, 10-hour days, 6 days a week, a large part of their childhood, you don't see them looking very happy here. And this is an iconic image of one of the factory girls just looking out a window, looking at the scenes below, the streets below. Some children, their families are wealthy enough to send them to school. So you have a divide that starts growing. Families that need to support themselves, now that cities are growing larger, there's more demand for housing, which means the price goes up. There's more demand for food, the price of food goes up. So expenses are higher, so families are forced to put their children to work just to make ends meet. And for the most case, they're working in factories, textile mills, machine shops, glass factories. Factory life, the industrial way, is really spreading throughout America. Now, it's not an easy life. Yes, children are working, but they're also getting hurt. This young boy worked in a factory, got his hand caught in a machine, and lost 2 of his fingers. The Library of Congress states that this boy, the boy's name is Giles Edmund Newsom. He was working at a mill in North Carolina, and a piece of a machine fell off, and it landed on his toe. That caused him to fall into a machine, which tore off the fingers. He was only 11 years old. So these are 11-year-old kids getting hurt. Here's another boy who was injured also in a cotton mill accident. His name's Alfred Padgett. 13 years old. He'd been working since the age of 12. Got his hand caught in a spinning machine. And it's interesting, in his interview, he says, do they think they'd give me wages while I'm out with this bad hand? No, I can't read and write. So these kids aren't going to school. They can't read and write. They're just working from early youth. You also have a lot of people being unemployed. You have big factories. People are moving to the cities to get jobs, but sometimes the growth isn't big enough to provide jobs. So here's an unemployment meeting, mostly men here. And the unemployed people start becoming very vocal. And you have an event. It's called the Commonweal Army. The Commonweal Army began marching in 1894. And it was also known as the Coxey Army. And they marched on Washington, D.C. These are unemployed men, mostly, who are expressing concern that due to their lack of employment, due to the lack of jobs, that they're very much unable to provide for their families. These are mostly railroad workers, but this is really the beginning that people start organizing themselves to speak up to the government, to businesses, and show that they are not happy with the way things are in regards to business, and they are demanding changes be made. It's the beginning of labor forming together and creating unions.